Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Stephanie, and today I'm going to be talking all about mine and my son's breastfeeding journey and how we've made it so far. So my son is currently 15 months old and he still does nurse. He nurses once a day, basically just for that little bit of extra vitamins. But it definitely was a rough road getting here this far, honestly, in the beginning, and even more than halfway through, I didn't think that we could make it this far. My goal alone was just to make it to at least a year without having to supplement formula. Nothing against formula fed babies or moms who formula feed. It was just a goal of mine. I really wanted to try to give my son the best there is as long as I possibly could. So I wrote down a bunch of notes on my phone because when I sat and thought about it, there were things that I was like forgetting that I had to put in order and kind of remember how everything went, because like I said, this wasn't an easy journey. So I'm just gonna talk about it. I'm gonna try to make this as short and sweet as possible, though like I said, it's been 15 months, so it's gonna be a little bit lengthy, but I hope that maybe this can give some moms maybe some tips and tricks on how to get to your goal of a year or longer, maybe even give a little bit of motivation to help you keep going even though you feel like stopping. Because I can say there was a few times in my journey where I felt like I couldn't do it anymore and I wanted to stop. Okay, so we're gonna start with at birth. Now, I am a first-time mom. This is my only child, and when he was first born, I didn't know what I was doing. For me, my delivery was a little bit traumatic, so unfortunately I wasn't able to like get my son right away, you know, to just put him on my skin and, you know, get that kind of skin to skin and the initial connection from mom to baby. So I was a little nervous off the bat because like I said, I did plan to breastfeed and I thought that might affect it. Now, I still don't know if it did or not. I do know though, when I was still in the delivery room and everything was finally settled and everybody left, I was given my son and he was not latching. Granted, this was new to him and I both, and I didn't really know what I was doing. He probably knew more of what he was doing than I did, but he didn't latch right away, which was okay. We moved into our recovery room and we were there for 2 days because I did have a vaginal birth, and within those 2 days, I'm not sure if every hospital does it, I know many do, where if you are breastfeeding they give you this chart to document how often they're feeding, for how long on each side, all that stuff. And my son, for the first couple days, he was sleeping a lot, and you know, they tell you to wake him up, but there was a couple times where he wouldn't wake up to nurse, and I did everything I was told to do. Now, I will tell you where I messed up, and I want to give the advice to anybody who feels they might need it. If you are offered help in the hospital from a latch consultant, a nursing consultant, take it. I wish that I had, because I had so much trouble in the hospital getting him to latch, and I'm just a little bit of an anxious person, so for whatever reason, I think that got in the way of me reaching out and asking for the help that I should have asked for. Because what ended up happening was he was totally fine. By the day that we were discharged, he was at a perfect weight where they weren't concerned. However, I did have a nurse or two that gave me a hard time because they would come in and check my chart and he wasn't feeding as often as they wanted him to. Now, my thing at the time too was like, okay, if he's not hungry, he's not gonna eat. Like, he's not fussing like he's hungry. He's not gonna get to a point of starving, you know, like maybe I'm wrong, I don't know, but that's just how I was looking at it. And I did get him to latch a couple times by myself, but for the majority of the time, I had my best friend there and my mom and my sister, who was like always helping me when it came time to feeding him to get him to latch. And it wasn't the easiest off the bat. We had to try a couple different positions. Like, I had him on the boppy pillow in front of me laying across. My favorite hold was the football hold. That seemed to give the least amount of problems getting him to latch. That was in the hospital. Then we were discharged because, like I said, he was all good to go. His weight was fine. And by the time we got home, things definitely didn't get easier. And this is where I started to regret not asking more questions and asking for more help, because the first couple days were rough. It would take me 15 minutes, sometimes longer, just to even get him to latch. And then the times that, you know, because they're newborn, they shuffle around, whatever. Sometimes he would unlatch and I have to get him back on, and it was like the same struggle every time. I think it was by actually, this might have only been the second day, because my milk came in the third day. The third day that I was home. The second day that I was home, so now he was 4 days old, he would not latch. I'll never forget it. I was sitting on the couch and I'm trying to get him to eat, and he's screaming, he's hungry, and I couldn't get him to latch. And I remember going into the room because at this point, like, my husband was outside doing yard work and I'm on the couch. I'm trying to get him to latch and he's just fussing, and I couldn't get him to eat. And I started to lose my mind a little bit. So I went into my bedroom and I pulled out my pump that I had gotten from my insurance, and I didn't want to pump colostrum, but I felt like at the time I had no choice. So I started pumping because one of my issues as well was I had flat nipples. They weren't inverted, but they were flat, so they were not erect enough for him to just latch on. I knew that was an issue, so I figured let me try to pump a little bit just to get them like erect and then try to get him on. And I tried this for probably what felt like forever. I think it might have only been like 10 minutes, and it still wasn't working. And I remember just putting my son down on the bed, and I came outside crying to my husband. I'm like, please, please help me, I don't know what to do. Now I do want to mention as well, this played a big part in it. This was, like I said, he was 4 days old. He hadn't pooped since the day he was born at this point. So it had been now 3 days without him passing any stool, which I do know for newborns that it's normal for them to go some time. I don't remember exactly the length of time that it's like normal, but still, like, I could tell that he was bothered. So by this point, I thought in my head, because my husband came in and he was like trying to help me. And actually, I want to mention this before I go any further. He was trying to help me to the point where, because I'm crying and he hasn't eaten, I asked him to please suck on my nipple, do something to get it erect and get it ready for him, because it wasn't doing it on its own. He tried that, it didn't work. I was so desperate to the point where I got a cap from, I think it was like one of my hair products, and I washed it out and I popped a hole in the one side of it and I put it on my nipple, and I had my husband suck on that so that my nipple would be like going into the cap and kind of form that erectness that my son needed. Tried that, still didn't work. So by this point, we had a feeling that his stomach was bothering him from not going to the bathroom. We were getting plenty of wet diapers, but like I said, he just hadn't pooped. So I called my mother-in-law crying, and I was like, what do we do? He hasn't pooped. And she told us, now I know I might get crap for this, and this wasn't doctor recommended, but I talked to plenty of mothers who did the same thing with their kids and they were perfectly fine. And my son being one of them, he was perfectly fine. We ended up using the Q-tip method, and all that was you put a little bit of Vaseline on the end of a Q-tip and you just stick it in their rectum just as far as like the cotton is on the Q-tip for literally just a second. Well, let me tell you, we did that. My husband closed his diaper up, and before he even picked him up off the changing table, you just heard him explode. He was so constipated, and I think that played a big part in the first couple days being as hard as it was, because as soon as that happened, it was easier for him to feed. Now granted, we did have a latching problem, and I don't really know what it was to this day. I never got him checked for having tongue tie or lip tie. Like I said, as a first time mom, it just wasn't something that I thought of, and maybe that was the case, I don't know. Because even for, I want to say like a month after that, it was still more difficult. It took me some time. I probably spent more time getting him to latch than I actually got him to eat. He was still eating plenty, don't get me wrong. He was eating for at least 20 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes every single time. But to get him to latch on was just a struggle from the start, and for at least that first like month and a half. So you can imagine at this point, that whole time was honestly just, it was rough. There was a lot of times where I just cried. I sat on the couch and I cried, and I just kept trying to put my boob in his mouth and kept trying to just get him to latch. And when he finally did, I could take a sigh of relief, but it was just a struggle. And I dealt with that, like I said, for about a month and a half. And there were a few times where I wanted to stop because it was just a really hard time, but I just kept telling myself this is what I want to do, and I kept pushing through, and I just did it. So then there was one night, this was around that time period, it had been like, he would have been just shy of 2 months old at this point, and he was sleeping, and my husband and I were sitting in the living room, and I just started watching videos on different positions to breastfeed and different methods to get them to latch better. And the one method I found was the flipple method. If you don't know what the flipple method is, I can't really show you, but basically what you do is you take your nipple between these two fingers, like, okay, so this is my nipple. You take your nipple between these two fingers, you drag it down from their nose to their mouth, and then once they get your nipple in their mouth, you take this finger and you flip their top lip out like that so that it goes over. And he had woken up in the middle of the night, and I was like, you know what, let me give this a try. No lie. First time I did it, it feels a little weird at first until you get used to doing it. But first time I did it and I got his lip to flip out right, he was on. And he was good. He didn't pop off once or anything. And I figured for us, I'm like, this is it, this is it. So I literally, from that time on, until he got a little bit older, when I didn't really have to worry about it so much, I was using the Flipple method. That honestly like saved our journey. So then also by this point, this is probably around the same time, because I was out of work for 3.5 months and I wanted to get a little bit of a stockpile of milk frozen, obviously, for when I went back to work, because I do work a full-time job. So I started pumping only in the mornings, and that was just because we got pretty lucky and my son would sleep mostly through the night. And I was getting up a little bit early because I would get up when my husband does, because I figured if my son is still sleeping, I'm gonna get up when I'm like really full and then pump. And I was doing that every morning, getting between like 8 and 11 ounces, depending on if he woke up in the middle of the night and how much he ate in the middle of the night. I would get between 8 and 11 ounces every single morning. So I was storing that for like a good month and a half. I don't know exactly how much I had stored by the time I did go back to work, because I know a couple weeks before I went back to work, I started adding a couple more pump sessions throughout the day, which I obviously wasn't getting nearly as much. In those pump sessions, I was maybe getting 2 to 4 ounces every time with those. Usually 2, not likely 4, but for the most part. So one thing that also really made me nervous, because I did plan on getting to at least a year, I was nervous to give my son a bottle. I was petrified because I've heard horror stories of the baby, once they're introduced to the nipple on the bottle, they prefer that. And I knew, because that's how it was working to begin with, that I wasn't going to make enough milk to pump, because your body just doesn't respond to a pump the way it's going to respond to baby. It's not going to happen. Some people are, well, you know, better off than others, but for the most part, your body is just going to respond best to the baby and make the most milk, and they'll get more out than a pump. So I could already see how I was kind of regulated to the pump. I was only going to produce so much on the pump. So I was really nervous to introduce the bottle, because I didn't want to ruin what I had planned for this journey. So it was about 2 weeks before I went back to work, we decided to introduce him to the bottle. And I'll never forget this, because as a mom, you're so needed when you're a breastfeeding mom. If you are one and you're watching this, you know it. So the night that we were giving him the bottle, I was an anxious mess. I was literally pacing back and forth in the kitchen before putting the bottle in the warmer, and I was just like trying to tell my husband like how to do everything as if he didn't know. And I'm on the phone with my mom and I'm like crying, because I'm like, I'm just so nervous, whatever. And I got off the phone with my mom, and my husband sat down on the one couch, I sat down on the other, and he started to feed in the bottle. And it was so weird, because now, first of all, we got very lucky. My son was the type of baby where he didn't really care where the source was coming from. He just wanted the milk. So wherever he was getting it from, he was fine with. He took to the bottle with absolutely no problem. But I remember watching my husband, and I, for a second, felt useless. And like my job was being taken over, and I lost it. I just like completely lost my shit. The one thing that did help me feel better as far as that went was right after that we went outside, and I called my mom, and I'm crying, and you know, she made me feel better or whatever. But I said to my husband, I was like, well, how does it feel for you, you know, doing that? And his response to me was, I feel like I'm worth something. And I felt like terrible, because I'm like, here I am getting like upset at the fact that like he finally has a job in this, because we all know the dads don't really play much of a role in the very beginning. To hear that he felt worthy and felt like, you know, he was needed definitely helped to ease my mind. And after that, he took to the boob fine. Even after that, like I said, we got lucky, and my son just didn't care where the source was coming from. He was just getting food, and he was good to go. So then I went back to work, and this is where it became a little bit more stressful as well. Now, there was also a reason for the added stress in my particular situation, because I work with my oldest sister at the same job, at the same position, and we would, I mean, we're sisters, we don't care. We would pump together. We had 3 breaks a day where we got to go in the conference room and pump. So my sister and I, we'd go in the conference room every break and we'd pump together, and she was in there producing between like 5 ounces and sometimes 9 ounces, like every pump session. And here I am pumping like 2 ounces every pump session. And I was like, oh my God, like this is crazy. Now granted, like I said, in the beginning of going back to work, I had a decent stash already put away, so I wasn't like too worried. But in the back of my mind, I was worried because I'm thinking like, well, obviously as time goes on, that milk is gonna be used up, so I need to compensate somehow. So I was so stressed about this. And granted, like that was probably the worst thing I could do, was compare my sister and I, because we are 2 completely different women. Obviously our bodies are gonna produce things differently, produce milk differently. So I tried all of the sources of trying to boost your milk production. I tried flaxseed, brewer's yeast, coconut milk, coconut water, oatmeal, more water in general. That pill, I honestly can't remember what it's called now. It's not just in pill form. Fenugreek, that's what it is, fenugreek. I tried mother's milk tea, which was disgusting. I tried so many things. And I can tell you, if you have tried any of those things and it works for you, congratulations, that's great. And I don't mean any sarcasm by that at all. Seriously, that's great. I'm glad it worked for you. However, I just want to maybe help a mom who was in the same position I was, and that is that some mothers' bodies just regulate, and there is no making more. There's nothing you can eat or drink or do, how much sleep you get, nothing that's going to make you produce more, and your body just regulates, and that's it. That was what happened to me. I can say there was one thing that I did to change and up my production a little bit, and that was because I was researching like a mad woman, trying to find a remedy to my milk production and make more. I would drive my husband nuts, I would drive everybody nuts, because it would be all I talk about, because I was so stressed out about it. The one thing I did do, I saw a video on this girl who was talking about how she was able to make a little bit more, and what she did, and she actually just exclusively pumped. She didn't even nurse. What helped her was she was using the same pump I was, which is the Medela Pump in Style Advanced, which is like the average Medela insurance supplied pump. And I would notice, like when I'm watching myself pump too, and I didn't feel any bit of uncomfortableness per se. I mean, it's pumping, it's not, you know, comfortable, but I didn't feel like there was an issue until I saw pictures, and I noticed that my nipples were too big for the normal size flanges that come with the pumps. And I wish I would wrote down, I think it's a 22, I don't know if it's inch, maybe it's not inch, I don't know, but there's like an average size, a middle size, and then the largest size. So looking at pictures and comparing myself to these pictures, I noticed that maybe I needed a bigger size. So I ordered the next size up, and wouldn't you know, I was getting 1 ounce to 2 ounces more every pump session. So that, I can tell you, is worth a try if you feel like you are not getting as much as you are making in the pump. I mean, either way, from what I've read and what I've been told and, you know, my own research, you can't empty yourself from a pump, like I said, from what I've heard. And obviously, honestly, that's what it seemed like for me as well, because I still think that if I was nursing my son all day and I could have stayed home, he would have been able to get more than I was able to pump in the same amount of time. But getting the bigger flanges helped me a lot. Like I said, I still wasn't getting nearly as much as like my sister was, but I would get between 3 and 4 ounces pumping. Now this was also, it also changed a little bit because, like I said, my body just regulated, so I was always making the same amount of milk. So what happened for me was, there was a point in time where my son was just not content if he did not have a full belly. So I would have to nurse him before I left for work, and then I have a 40-minute commute to work. As soon as I got to work, I'd have to leave early to get there and nurse him in my car before I then handed him off to my mom, who would take him for me. Because if I didn't, he was just not happy. So in doing that, I was obviously, he's taking a little bit more milk than I would have to pump later. So I was pumping a little bit less. When he started to get a little bit older and he didn't have to nurse right before I went to work, I started getting about 1 ounce, sometimes 1.5 ounces, maybe 2 ounces, maybe, my first pump session of the night at work, I was getting a little bit more because he wasn't taking that before I went to work. That's how regular my body was. Like, it literally just made the same amount every single day. So then we introduced solids to my son at around 4.5, 5 months, and before anyone goes jumping down my throat, we got the okay from his pediatrician, and he was showing all signs of being ready to eat solids. He obviously wasn't eating it in place of breastfeeding at all. He would still nurse before every single meal, and I would just make him purees from fruits and vegetables, and he'd have a little bit of that after he nursed basically a full stomach. But that did start helping in the sense that he was not nursing in the middle of the night anymore. He slept through the night entirely. So by the time he was eating and then I go to work and I pump again, now I'm even pumping a little bit more because he still wasn't taking as much as he was beforehand. And that's pretty much how it was for the next few months, up until he was about, I want to say, like 10 months old. By around 10 months old, now also mind you as well, my son got teeth really early. His first 2 bottom teeth came in, I want to say at 4.5 months, or like right, no, you know what, it was around 4.5, 5 months, because it was right after we introduced solids. He got his first 2 teeth down here. He's 15 months old now and he has 12 teeth. And that was the last time I checked, which was a few weeks ago. So who knows if he has more in there, truthfully. But he started getting teeth very rapidly. So by the time he was around 9.5, 10 months, we felt comfortable giving him most things that were, you know, okay for his belly, obviously nothing crazy. And he began to eat more solids, what he wanted. So with that, he was nursing less throughout the day as well. But now at this point, my body was then regulating to that. Instead of me then having more, after a couple weeks, instead of me having more to pump at work because he wasn't eating as much during the day, my body was saying, oh, he's not eating as much throughout the day, so we don't need to make as much, is what it was basically doing. So I was still pumping roughly the same amount at work for a few months after that. So then by that point, we had gone 10 months with his sole nutrition source was coming from the breast milk, which was so close to our goal. However, I began to become a little bit stressed out even after that because they do need breast milk or formula until at least 12 months. So because my body was still producing less, I had hit a point where I was just matching what he needed throughout the day and wasn't getting any extra to store. I did also forget to mention, I'm sorry I forgot to mention this, I should have said it a while ago, but once I started to make a little less when he stopped nursing before I walked into work, I got a little bit paranoid, so I actually would pump when I got home from work at 1 o'clock in the morning. And I pumped until I got at least like 3 or 4 ounces. And when I say that, I mean, I didn't just have a time limit where I was pumping. I was pumping until I saw that I had 3 to 4 ounces of milk, which sometimes took like an hour or more because I was just so hell-bent on he's breastfeeding until he's at least a year old. So back to where we were. At this point now, I knew we were gonna make the goal. He was doing really well. Even though I was just keeping up, I was still keeping up, and that's what I had to start telling myself, and it took me almost a year to figure that out, but I had to stop stressing about having to have such an abundance in the freezer. I needed to remind myself that my goal was a year, and if I make it to even just that, and I had no extra left in my freezer, he was still getting what he needed and what we wanted to give him. So it got a little bit easier once I put that into my mind and I wasn't trying to be milked like a cow. Those last couple months, he was only really nursing once in the morning, once in the day, and then he'd get his bottle at night with my husband before going to bed. Otherwise, he was eating mostly solids. He wanted that more than the milk. And then by 12 months, obviously, they can have all the solids they want, so he's still mostly eating that. He was still nursing in the morning and getting his bottle at night as well. And then, because he was a year old and didn't absolutely need the breast milk, we did switch him to his milk, which we have him on Ripple milk. It's milk made from pea protein, it's non-dairy, and he was having that at night and still nursing from me in the morning. And that's basically what it's been for the last few months. Like I said, he's 15 months old now and he nurses first thing in the morning, and that's it. His milk source comes from the Ripple milk and he eats solids throughout the day, and that's been our journey. At this point, like I said, he's 15 months old. After I hit the 1 year mark, I was like, let me go for a year and a half, you know, just to still get him those nutrients, because I honestly do believe, and maybe I'm wrong, who knows, but I honestly do believe my son is a very healthy kid, and he's obviously gotten ill. He's a toddler, he's going to get ill, but I feel like he's gotten through his illnesses so much quicker than some people that I know with kids his age and even younger. He hasn't had as severe illnesses, and I feel like a lot of that honestly is from the breast milk and us being able to do it for as long as we have, because honestly, whether you like it or not. Breast milk is going to give them nutrients and vitamins that you can't get in a formula. I mean, it's literally specifically made for them, and everything is 100% natural. Nothing is genetically modified. Nothing is chemically combined. And like I said, I really don't want to get like the wrong point across and say that I'm trying to bash moms who formula feed, or that like I'm totally against formula feeding, because honestly, if it came down to my son needed it because I couldn't breastfeed for whatever reason, he would have been given formula. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. My point is, I just think it's so important that if you have the ability, and especially because there's so many women who don't and would give anything to have it, if you have the ability, yes, it's stressful. Yes, it's a lot of log hours. Yes, it's just your whole life revolves around it, but it's just so worth it. If you have the ability, just do it and don't give up. Time, you know, as a mother, you know it, time goes so fast in the blink of an eye. And before you know it, you're done nursing, and you can look back like I do all the time and think, wow, even through all that, we did it. We made it here. And I'm still making enough for my son to nurse in the beginning of the day, and it's awesome. At this point, I actually do have, I think maybe only like 6 ounces in the freezer, because I was getting to a point at the very end where I was only pumping like an ounce every other session, that I just started bagging those in 1 ounce bags and left them in the freezer. And at this point, I only use them for like if he does have a cold or he's sick or something, I'll give him some of that in his Ripple milk. We've used it for ear infections. We've used it for, he had a little bit of conjunctivitis at one point. We used it for that, and it's helped tremendously. I actually just used a piece today, actually just as like a little ice, because he fell and busted his lip and I had him sucking on it, and he loved it. But it has definitely been a long, hard road, and I applaud myself and I pat myself on the back for it all the time. And I would do the same to anybody who has extended breastfed, or even breastfed at all for any amount of time. It's such an accomplishment because it is such a job, but it's so great. And I applaud every single one of you for dedicating yourself to doing it for as long as you did, are still doing, have done, whatever. Honestly, we all deserve pats on the back, and maybe even a back massage, because it's a lot of work. So that's it, that's our journey. I wish I could show you him, but he is currently napping. But if you guys watch any of my other videos, you see him plenty of other times in our family vlogs or just running around in other videos. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope maybe it might have helped somebody or motivate somebody to keep going. I'm sorry if this is a little all over the place and I just talk too much. It's just, honestly, it is a lot has happened, so there was a lot to talk about. So if you made it this far, thank you so much for making it this far. I hope you're all having a great day, night, afternoon, whatever time it is, wherever you are in the world, and I'll see you all very, very soon in my next one. Bye.